What's happened, everyone? If you recall, a little while ago, we went over a very easy way to create chord melodies using our small chord shapes that we've been playing, and we did that with Happy Birthday. Very simple song with a very recognizable melody. And we discovered to create simple chord melodies with small chord shapes, all you have to do is know the progression of the song and simply play that progression with the small chord shapes that have the melody note on top. You're simply choosing the correct inversions, the correct shapes that keep the melody note on top. Because most of the time when you play tunes, the vocal melody or the melody of the tune is probably going to be a chord tone of the chord that you're playing. So that melody note's going to be built into the chord anyway, and you just have to choose the shape that has that melody note on top. And if the melody is not a chord tone, it's probably going to be nearby a chord tone, anyway. So you just choose a chord shape that always has the melody on top. And the way that we did that with Happy Birthday looked like this. If I play it simply. Right? So all I'm doing right there is playing the progression, but choosing voicings that always have the melody note as the highest note, because then we hear that as the melody when we play it. If you do that, it's pretty much like a button you can press in your mind that will immediately give you chord melody, or a very simple chord melody that you can mess with if you want. What we are going to do today is revisit that tune because it's so simple and it's such a recognizable melody, and we are going to use our cheat sheet of things to do in a progression that I posted earlier this week. And we're going to go through those things and look for ways to use those strategies to enhance or change this chord progression while keeping the melody the same, right? So that's the core thing right here. We're going to try a bunch of different chords. We're going to swap out for relatives. We're going to add 5/0s. We're going to play minor 4s, all of that stuff, but still make sure the melody note is the top note. Because if we do that, the tune is still going to sound like the tune. It's still going to sound like Happy Birthday because the melody is still very clear, but we're going to add all these different colors underneath, which might sound cool. That last thing that I said, might sound cool, is very important because at the end of the day, all of these things are tools, strategies, tactics to enhance the progression in various ways. But none of them will guarantee that the progression will sound better, right? At the end of the day, you could do all of these things and still think, nah, I think the original 1-4-5 sounds the best. And that's totally cool. These are things that you can use to taste. Just because they're cool and they're advanced and ooh, fancy does not mean that they're automatically the better choice. At the end of the day, it is up to your ear. There are going to be some people that watch this video and are going to try these things out, and they might be like, nah, I don't really like it. And that's totally cool. It's totally cool to not like these sounds, right? You can know that they're available and you can mess around with them, but at the end of the day, if you're like, meh, I like the normal one, I think that's more fitting for the tune, totally fine. But what you have to do is you must know that these strategies are available, because there are going to be certain instances where having these tools available to use will actually get you the sound that you're wanting. So always have this stuff in the back of your mind. Look for opportunities to use it. Doesn't mean you have to use it, but just know that they're there. So with that in mind, let's get started, and we're going to go through this tune, see what types of things we can do to the progression. First thing we have to know is what the actual progression is. So the first thing, the tune is actually kind of in 3 if we play it in time. I'm sort of not playing it in time when I play it. But if you want to play it evenly in time, with everyone singing the melody, you kind of have to play it in rhythm. So it is in 3. So ba 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 like that. So that's what I mean. So that's how I'm going to write the chords out on the screen. The chords are, we have a little 2-note pickup, G, so just one chord basically, then a 5 chord, another 5, then a 1, then a bunch of 1 1 1, then a 4, right? Then 1 1 5 1. That's the whole tune. So clearly just a bunch of 1 and 5 really, and we have like 1 4 chord in the middle right there. So it should be easy to mess with this because we have a lot of room to experiment. So let's get started. For the very first 2 chords, G and D, you might think, oh, let's swap them out for the relatives. Let's do this, all this fancy stuff. Because it's the beginning of the song, I'm actually not going to touch those chords. Because if you do, it might sound like a totally different song at that point, right? You need to kind of tell your listeners, hey, this is the song I'm playing. And if I go, that is unmistakable. Everyone knows what that is. And everyone's going to say, oh, this is Happy Birthday, right? But if I start messing with that, there's a chance that the different sounds might kind of mask what the actual song is. So let's not do that for those first 2 chords. Let's keep them how they are, and then we'll mess around. So the first thing I'm going to do is mess around with the next progression. That's this moment. That 5 and then 1. Okay? So go through our checklist. The first thing we see on the checklist, replace with relatives. Can I do that right here? So what would that be? Again, I'm going to kind of rapid fire through this because hopefully, if you're at this point in the series, you're already pretty comfortable with all these strategies. If you're not, I highly recommend you revisit the lessons in which we talk about all of these things. So I am going to kind of go through this pretty quick. So I have 5 and 1. If I want to replace with relatives, that would be 3 and 6, right? 5 chords relative is 3. 1 chord's relative is 6. And I can easily find those by simply looking at the chord shapes, turning them into the relative minor. How do I do that? This is the 5 chord, D. Take the 5th, move it up a whole step. Relative minor, that's the 3 chord, B minor. Easy. I can also do that with the G chord, right? The 1 chord, the next chord of the progression. Turn this into the relative, same strategy. Take the 5th, move it up a whole step. 6 chord, E minor. Easy. So now I've got this. Instead of 5, 3 to 6, right? I'm actually even going to do this. Use the same strings for both of them. 5 bass to 5 bass, B minor, E minor. Notice what I'm doing. The melody note is still on top. I'm not just tossing in any random B minor and E minor. I'm playing specific voicings, specific inversions that have the melody on top. Easy, right? Right? The first thing I see here is cool. I like the flavor, especially the 6 chord, right? Ending on the 6 is nice, adds that minor flavor that the song just doesn't have. Now it does. I'm going to do 5 of both of those. So instead of just 3 and then 6, I'm going to do 5 of 3 to 3 and then 5 of 6 to 6 while maintaining the melody. This should be very easy because if I know this chord is my 3 chord, I know it's 5 of is here. I don't even need to know what chord this is because I've memorized if I'm playing a 5 bass minor, or really 5 bass anything, major or minor, right? The 5 of will be here. 1 bass, same low note. We've talked about this. This is the 5 of that. That's the 5 of that, which means this is the 5 of this. That's my 2 minor chords, right? B minor, E minor. 3 chord, 6 chord. 5 of 3, 3. 5 of 6, 6. You can already hear that movement, right? So now all I need to do is make sure when I'm playing these chords, which by the way would be F sharp 7, 5 of B minor, and then B7, 5 of E minor, I just need to make sure that the melody's still on top. So I know what's my melody. That would be bottom and then bottom. So I know I have 4 notes right here. Each note, like the first note of each little pair, is always going to be during the 5 of. So this melody, that note needs to be during this chord. Oh, look at that. Works perfectly because the note is flat 7 of the chord. Perfect. So it sounds like this. Bum, bum. And it's going to be the same thing right here. Bum, bum. So this melody works perfectly with this move, these little 5 ofs. So what do I have? 1, 5, right? Next melody. 5 of 3, 3, 5 of 6, 6. I'm going to play that without talking. Already some nice color, especially with those 5 ofs, because those 5 ofs push your ear into the next chord. That's what's happening right here, which wasn't happening in the original tune, and it also wasn't happening when I simply just replaced the chords with the relatives. When I just played 3 and 6, you didn't really have that pull, but now I'm playing 5 of 3, to 3, and then 5 of 6 to 6. It's nice. I like it at least. How about this? I'm playing 5 ofs. Can I turn them into diminished? There's a super easy way I can not only do that, but also see a shape that will keep the melody on top. Watch this. That's my 5 of B minor, F sharp 7 with the melody note on top. Check this out. Root, up a half step. That's one of the diminished triads, and look, the melody's still on top. If I just played some random diminished triad built off this, like if I played that, that is correct. That's one of the diminished triads, but the melody's not on top. So I'm not going to consider this. I'm going to consider the shape that keeps the melody on top, and I know the melody at this moment is that note. So instead of F sharp 7, turn it into diminished. You can call this G diminished if you want. In reality, it's just F sharp 7 replacing 1 with flat 2. Go to our same B minor, and I'm going to do the same thing right here. B7, 5 of E minor. Instead of playing B, the root, replace it with flat 2. Diminished to E minor. Check it out. 1, 5, diminished into 3, diminished into 6. Already sounds pretty cool. Just for fun, I am not going to do the diminished moving to 3. I'm going to play the normal 5 of 3 right here. Right? And then I will do the diminished right here. Just for fun, just for variation. Right? All of these sounds we talked about. Right? So if this is confusing, check out some of those previous videos. It's that whole transitional section of the recent section of the Building Chord series. All of this stuff is in there. So nice, some pretty cool sounds, some kind of transitional moves that we weren't getting before. I enjoy it. Next section is just that sequence of G chords, right? G, G, G with that melody on top. D, B, G, or 5, 3, 1 of G. What can we do here? Now you might naturally say, that's the 1 chord, let's replace it with the relative. That would be E minor. That would sound like this. So E minor with the same melody on top. E minor with D on top, first note of the melody. E minor with B on top, next note of the melody. E minor with G on top, next note of the melody. You'll notice a lot of those notes are in E minor because the original melody came from G major, and E minor is the relative minor. That's the whole idea between relative major and minor. The melodies and notes often overlap, which is why you can easily swap them out. That's a cool choice, but to me, it's not really the best one because we just came from E minor. We just ended the previous phrase, bum on E minor. So if we do more E minor, bum, 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 it's not bad, but I'm kind of wanting a shift right there. I'm wanting a little bit of a change. So this is a sound that I don't know if I've necessarily talked about, but it's one of my personal favorites. The melody is 1 chord based, right? The melody is literally 5, 3, 1 of the 1 chord. It's an arpeggio of the 1 chord just starting on 5, 5, 3, 1, right? I personally really like to hear these notes on top of the 2 chord because what that does is it creates like a big kind of suspended flavor. So if I just play an A minor and sing that melody, there's A minor, 2 chord of the key, bum, bum, bum. Love that sound because what would that be? That would be this. That's the melody, D, B, G. On top of A minor, that would be 4, 2, and flat 7, giving you a really nice flavor. It's almost like an A sort of super sus sort of sound. It's not almost that, it literally is that. That's a G major with A in the bass. That's what's created when you do this. I love this sound. So what I'm gonna do is play that whole sequence with A minor, the 2 chord, while maintaining the melody on top. How do I do that? I need to find an A minor right here that has this note on top. Now, of course, this is D. This is not in an A minor chord. So this is a non-chord tone. Doesn't matter to me. I'm still going to choose a chord shape where this note is nearby. Well, I've got an A minor right here. That's a 2 chord. 1, 2. So I'm going to play A minor, but put this note on top. Keeping my melody on top, right? A minor, 5, 1, 3, with that note on top. The problem is I now don't have a third because I'm replacing the flat 3 of this A minor with that note. So I'm going to simply take the third, move it down an octave. Now I have this 3 bass chord, A minor, flat 3, 5, 1, with my melody on top. Cool shape. A minor, flat 3, 5, 1, 4. I like this. I'm going to keep this idea going with the next note of the melody. The next note of the melody is B. So how do I play A minor, the full A minor chord with this? Well, I see an A minor right here. 1, flat 3, 5. This would be 2. Nice. It's a shape we've talked many times about. Now, what's the next note of the melody? Bum, that would be flat 7 of A. So I want to play an A minor with that note on top. I can just keep playing the same little A minor, 1, flat 3, and then keep that flat 7 right there. So that's nice. But I can also play take that note, and instead of moving to this G, I'll move to this G. And I'll play A minor right here. 5 bass A minor with that melody. In this situation, it feels like I'm just kind of running inversions. A minor 3 bass, A minor 1 bass, A minor 5 bass. I mean, we've done that many times. We've done power-ups where we're just going, jumping between inversions. But fortunately, I can play the melody on top of all of those. It's a nice sound. Let me play that. Already pretty nice. I like that flavor for sure. Now there's something I notice. What am I playing right here? A bunch of A minor, giving me that interesting sound because the melody is always going to be non-chord tones, right? 4s and 2s and stuff. I'm playing a 2 chord. Can I play a 5 of 2 to get me into that chord before it happens? I actually have a perfect place to do that because I have a 2-note little pickup into that. Watch this. Watch these 2 little notes. Little pickup notes, and then the A minors. So during this note, maybe I can play the 5 of A minor. What would that be? A minor is the chord I'm targeting. It's 5 of is E7, which is interesting because I just came from E minor. So now I'm playing E minor, but turning it into E7, which becomes the 5 of the next chord. All I need to do is make sure I'm playing that E7, 5 of 2, with a voicing that has the melody, those 2 little pickup notes on top, right? This is E7 right here. That's E turning into dominant, right? Even diminished if I want to think about it like that. But this shape I'm not going to use because the melody is not on top. That note is the melody. So how can I play E7 with this note on top? Now I could just do this right here. This is root 3rd flat 7, but this is getting into some of the strings we're not on yet. Hopefully some of you have moved past me and you're already very familiar with these. But just to keep it on the bottom 4 strings, I'm going to play this same note here, right? That's D, D. And I'm going to play that E7 with this note on top. Bam, there it is. The same kind of dominant I've been playing this whole video, right? Root 3rd flat 7. So now I've got the whole thing. There's my little chord 2 hits of it. Bum, 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 bum. I like it so far. Just doing this, I almost feel like a little extra melody. So instead of bum, bum, I'm going to go blue, da, dum. I hear that happening. Almost creating an E7 with a flat 3, kind of a spicy dominant sound. And then A minor. I like it so far. Where am I going after that? C major, right? This is the kind of colorful moment of the tune where you have a 4 chord with sharp 4 on top as the melody. We've talked about this. Let's just play that from the E7 right here. I like it. It's nice. But I kind of want something maybe a little bit different. Instead of just doing a bunch of, 2 chord, 2 chord, 2 chord, how about I do a 2 chord, 2 chord, and then instead of playing another 2 chord, I do a transitional chord during this moment, during this melody note that takes me to 4. Well, this is a 4 chord. I've got tons of options. I can do 5 of 4. I can do 4 of 4. I can do 2 of 4. I can do all of those, right? So why don't I try something? How about I try 2 of 4? What would that be? We're in the key of G. The 4 chord is C. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 of this would be up a whole step, minor, like that. So technically I should be playing a D minor right before the C major. That's the 2 of 4. Does that work? Let's try with my melody. Remember, the melody has to stay on top or else it doesn't work, right? So 2 chord, 2 chord. I need to play a D minor with this melody note on top. Oh, look at that, D minor, flat 3, 5, 1. With that note, same shape I did over here. Does this work? Let's try it. From the E7. It's nice. Maybe I want to try a different way to play C. Instead of playing this, maybe I'll do like this. That's the same exact thing, 3 bass, 3, 5, 1, but I have to have sharp 4 on top. That's the melody at this moment. Maybe I'll do that. Not bad. I like it, and it works. It has an interesting sound. For me personally, I think I want more of a pull during this moment. The pull really, I think, works with this tune. Maybe I can do a 2 of 4 somewhere else, but for now, I'm actually not going to do that. I want to do something that has a stronger pull. So what I'm going to do here, 5 of 4, right? Dominant 1 chord always moves me to 4. And then maybe I can turn it into spicy dominant, grabbing some of those notes from that sound. Does that work? First, let me just figure out the sound. So from E7, A minor, boom, boom. I want to play G7 right now. There's G7. How did I find this? G major, 1, 3, 5, 1. Take the 1, replace it with flat 7, give me a full dominant chord. And guess what? The melody note at this moment is G, the root of G. So that note, that chord, I should say, is definitely going to work. And then I play C. Let's try it. You definitely hear a little bit more of that pull. It's still not exactly what I want, because I want to see if I can toss in some spiciness into this. Why don't I do this? I'm playing G7, flat 7, 3, 5, 1. Very common modification to this chord when moving to major is toss in flat 6. So instead of flat 7, 3, 5, 1, take 5, replace it with flat 6. Many people will call this sharp 5. You can do that too, because that creates this movement. Resolve to C, right? We've talked about that move in the mixing 5/ofs video. So does that work? I like it, but there's still a little bit of a modification I want to make. The thing I'm hearing is I want to make sure that my melody is connecting in a way that sounds connected. This sounds good, and I like it for sure, but I want to mess around with a different voicing. So I'm going to look for a different area to play. Instead of playing the G7 right here, can I play it up here? I'm just going to try it. So here's G. Can I turn this into G7? I can. Take my 5th, replace it with flat 7, 3, flat 7, 1. That's my G7. I'm going to play that into this C. But even that is good, but the notes are moving quite a bit. So I want to find a different way to play the C chord here that has the notes moving in a more subtle way. That would be G7 to C. So I'm going to play this G7 to this C, but keep the sharp 4 on top. How do I do that? There's my 5, sharp 4. I'm going to do that and then C. So watch this move. E7, A minor, G7 to C major. Boom. I like this move. Even though these chords that I was doing earlier are a little bit thicker, to me it's maybe a little bit too much. These smaller shapes give a more subtle movement that also allow the melody to kind of be more obvious, right? So I just personally like those. You can enjoy the bigger shapes if you want. I personally like these smaller ones. Whole thing. I like it so far. Now, earlier, I was playing this G7. If you remember, I was doing it down here. I tossed in that flat 6. Can I do the same thing right here? Know what it would look like? This is 3, flat 7, 1. Came from 3, 5, 1. There's my 5. Move it up a fret. 3, flat 6, 1. You can call this sharp 5 if you want. This would be an augmented triad. Lives inside spicy dominant. Talked about it. Does this resolve to that C? It does. I really like this sound. And again, what is this? I'm really thinking it's just G major, taking 5, replacing with flat 6. 5 of 4, moving to 4. Right? Maybe I could do something fun with the 4 chord, or the C major. 1, 2, sharp 4, something like that. And then resolve like that. Just messing around with the sounds, keeping the melody on top, of course. entire thing. I definitely like it. Now, the next move I hear from a mile away, and many of you probably do as well. What am I playing right here? 4 chord to another 4 chord. Everyone say it along with me. Minor 4 right here. So instead of holding a major 4 chord, normal 4, play minor 4. And I'm honestly not even going to play anything fancy. Triad, I think, sounds good right here. You can start to add in flat 7s, or you can do like the melodic minor version if you want, sneak in that stuff. Right now, triad sounds really good. Let's see what this sounds like. Right? Melody, got to make sure the melody's same. Sometimes it gets a little lost in there, so I want to make sure I'm really picking that high note. So far, I really like it. Now we've got the ending, okay? So the ending is going to be interesting because there's a lot of things that we can do with this moment. The original ending was 1, 1, 5, 1, right? All of those chords obviously sound good. We want to keep in mind the melody, of course, but the main thing that I see is I have 4 hits, right? I've got chord, 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 chord. The last chord, I'm going to obviously keep G, the 1 chord, so it sounds finished when we get there. But what I'm going to do right here is a strategy many people do. We have 4 total chords. The last chord is going to be 1, and what I'm going to do with the others is a sequence of 5/ofs that all take me here. So what it's going to look like, it's going to look like a 5 of this, which will be the 5 of this, which will be the 5 of my final chord. And the easiest way to do that is actually just look at the fretboard. Check this out. This is my last chord, the root of my last chord, G. Right? That's the last chord. The second to last chord will be this chord's 5 of, which is here. We've talked about that, up a power chord. So the second to last chord is going to be D7, D7 to G. But then the chord before D7 is going to be its 5 of. How do we find that? By looking here. That's A7. A7 is the 5 of D7. D7 is the 5 of G. But we also have one more chord. So if we look at this A7, right, we want to play the 5 of this chord before it. How do we find that? Same strategy. That's the chord we're going to. Its 5 of is here. E7. So look at what it looks like. We have a chord, E7, is the 5 of the next chord, A7. And then this A7 is the 5 of the next chord, D7. And then this D7 is the 5 of the final chord, G. So notice how I mapped that out. I knew I was ending on G, and I had a total of 4 chords. The last chord is G, so I have 3 transitional chords to play to get to that G. And I'm doing it with a sequence of 5/ofs. This is the 5 of that, that's the 5 of that, that's the 5 of that. And if you look at the fretboard, notice how this moves. You're always like moving down a power chord, like down this way or up a 4th. It's got kind of this like snaking pattern. If I just start on like a random note, right? This is the 5 of that, that's the 5 of that. That's the 5 of that. That's the 5 of that. Bump, 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 bump. That's also, by the way, the circle of fifths when you do that. Straight circle of fifths. So that's another thing that people will call this, a circle progression of all dominant chords. Bam, 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 bam. Extremely common. You're definitely going to hear this. You've definitely heard it before. I will say when you do this, it creates what many people would consider to be like an old-timey kind of sound, old jazz, big band jazz, or however you want to think about it. It's not going to be everyone's favorite sound, but it works perfectly right here, and I just want to test it out. So what do I have? 4 chords, E7, A7, D7, G. All I have to do is make sure I'm playing those chords with the melody on top. What's my melody during this moment? Happy birthday to you. So B, G, A, G. That's my melody. I just have to make sure I'm playing those notes with each chord. So the first note of the melody of this moment, B, that has to be E7 underneath it, right? How do I do that? Let's figure it out. Here's E right here, E major, 3, 5, 1. Turn it into dominant. Take the 5, move it up to flat 7, 3, flat 7, 1. Same chord shape I was using over here for that G7. Oh, and look at this. There's my melody note. the 5 of the chord, 1, 5. So this is 3, flat 7, 1, 5. Perfect. It's literally a chord tone. Like I mentioned, a lot of times these are going to be chord tones of chords that you choose. So bottom, E7. Now I'm going to go to A7 with this melody note on top. How do I do that? Well, I see an A chord right here, right? A major, 5, 1, 3. Oh, look at that. G it's flat 7. Perfect, right? Lines up perfectly. E7, A7. I've got one more chord, D7, with this melody note on top. D is right here, 3, 5, 1. Turn it into dominant. Take the 5, move it to flat 7, 3, flat 7, 1. And look at our melody note, another 5. Perfect. So E7, A7, D7, and finish with G. Let me play that whole sequence. It's nice. And there's one thing that you'll notice. I'll play that ending one more time. This is what happens when you do sequence of 5 ofs like this, like 5 of 5 of 5 of 5, etc. You hear a chromatic movement in there because there is one. If I pick it out, listen to this note, bum, D, and the next chord, bum, C sharp, and the next chord, C natural, then final chord, B. So you hear this, that's built into that, just as a side note. But notice what I'm doing. I chose this movement because I know it's popular, sequence of 5 ofs, and I'm choosing voices that have the melody on top. And they happen to work out perfectly, right? E7, A7, D7 to G. Now, what am I doing right there? 5 ofs each time. And these are just normal dominant. I'm not even playing like any added tones, flat 2s or anything. It's just normal dominant. But because we're playing 5 ofs, can I turn them all into diminished? How would I do that? By simply taking the root, moving it up a half step to flat 2. That gives me a diminished chord, right? Can I do that with these shapes? Let's try it. E7, the first one, 3, flat 7, 1, 5, melody note on top. Well, this is very convenient because I can take this root, move it up a fret. Now I've got this diminished 7 shape with the melody still on top. Next chord, A7, with the melody on top. Bum, bum. Turn this chord into diminished. How do I do that? Take the root, G string in this case, A, move it up a half step to flat 2. Oh, look at that. The same shape. That's just how diminished chords work. They'll always end up looking something like this, right? Bum, bum. D7, the last chord before our G. Turn this into diminished. There's my root. Move it up a half step. Oh, look, the same diminished 7 chord, right? Resolving the G. Notice the melody's still on top. I would say it's a little strong. It's kind of fun. I don't know if this is the choice, but it's nice to know that it's there. Side note, this is something maybe we'll talk about down the road. When you do a sequence of 5 ofs, like E7, A7, D7, G, you're actually playing, if you turn them all into diminished chords like I'm doing right now, you're actually playing diminished chords moving chromatic backwards. So this would be E7, this would be A7, this would be D7, this would be G. You've probably heard that before. So it just feels like someone's going, oh, a bunch of diminished chords moving chromatic backwards. But what you're actually doing is playing a circle progression all with dominance. E7, A7, D7, G. Watch this. E7, you're actually playing this. This is A7, you're actually playing this, A7, right? Just turning in diminished. And this is actually D7, right? Because it's coming from that chord to 1. That's a side note. That, of course, doesn't work here because we lose the melody. But that's an option, right? All diminished chords. Let's do it from here. I'd say it's a little strong. So instead of doing that, I'm going to do the diminished chord only on the D7, the last one, because that gives it a nice pull at the ending. Bum, bum. So I'll play normal E7, E7, A7, diminished instead of D7. And again, how are we discovering these diminished chords? Looking at our dominant, taking the root, moving up a half step to flat 2. Because these diminished chords, what are they? It's simply flat 2, 3, 5, flat 7 of your 5 of. That's it. Right? Super easy to do it. And I'm playing the full version, right? All 4 notes. You could do diminished triads as well if you want to. Just the 3-note versions, that's fine. But I'm choosing the 4-note versions right here just because it works perfectly with what I'm playing. So this is a nice movement. That's the entire thing, right? I'll play it. It's a nice sound. That right there, finished, don't have to do anything else. But let's experiment maybe a little bit more with some stuff. I like the sequence. I like E7, A7, D7, G, but it does have, like I mentioned, sort of an old-timey sound, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to try something else. How about instead of playing E7, A7, D7, G, I simplify. So I'm just going to play A7, the 5 of 5, and then 2 hits of D7. And maybe I can mess around a little bit with the types of D7 that I play, maybe some suspended shapes or something. So instead of E7, A7, D7, G, for the first note of the melody, boom, I'm going to play A7 right there. That's the 5 of D7. So it's keeping a little bit of that 5 of sequence happening, but just not doing all 3 of them. Just the A7 to D7 and then resolving to 1. So how would I play A7 right here with 2 on top? Or with this melody note on top? 2 in this case. So A7, 1, turn into flat 7. The melody note is right here. That's its 2, right? So that would sound like, bum, that's my A7, I like it. And then the melody goes here. This needs to be D7. Now this is interesting. What note is this? This is G. This is D major's 4. So this might be perfect for a type of supersus or something. So this is D major, 1, 5, flat 7, and then 4. Not D major, there's no third in this chord. This is a D sus. I like this flavor. And then how about I do this? Open D string, by the way, if you can't tell. And then I'll play the same diminished chord that I was playing earlier, because I do like that final pull. So now for the ending, A7, D sus, diminished. I like that. That to me has a little bit more of a modern flair than all of the 5 of, all that stuff. I like that sound. So A7 with my melody on top, D suspended to our diminished chord. It's still D7. It's really just D7 turning in diminished, resolving to 1. I like that. If I were to kind of pick a final answer, that would be mine. I think that sounds nice. I like the suspended flavor that we're getting from that D, and then the diminished. It's a nice flavor instead of the sequence of dominance. Let's hear the whole thing. Pretty cool. That right there, finished. You can move on with that. You can use that. You can modify at will. That's kind of the approach that I like to take with this stuff. Looking at different concepts that we have, 5 ofs, we used replacing with relatives, we used diminished, we tossed in a little bit of spicy dominant where it's not usually used. You know, we're moving to a major chord and we move to that 4 chord, but we're tossing one of those spicy notes, flat 6, doing that stuff. Minor 4 right here. We've got a lot of stuff that works really well. Again, just going down that checklist, looking for things to do. Now, you could completely rearrange this and get something totally different out of it if you want, but that's the point. You have these strategies in mind that you can approach this progression and mess around with it to your heart's content. The last thing I would do with this, and this is kind of unnecessary, but it's fun, is doing like a false ending. So how are we ending? So we have bum, 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 bum. Instead of ending on 1, you know what I could do right here? End on 6, relative minor. That would sound like this. That gives you this sense of, oh, the tune hasn't ended yet. Because you're expecting to hear bum, bum, just a final 1 chord. That sounds finished. But when you change it for the relative minor, it feels like, oh, we're not done yet. Because that's a chord I wasn't expecting. And all I did was replace the 1 chord with 6. Classic sound. What this does, a false ending like this, allows you to keep the tune going. So I can almost like repeat that ending moment. So I can go, right? Maybe a little extra melody. One more time. To have a little bit more of a dramatic finish, right? A false ending. Well, I can already look at things that I'm doing right here that might be kind of fun. I'm doing my false ending on E minor, the 6th chord. And I know where I'm going after this. I'm going to repeat that final run of A7, D suspended, the diminished chord bass off D7, and then 1. I'm going back to A7. So you know what I'm going to do? 5 of A7, which we were playing earlier. That was the E7. I'll bring it back right now. So A7, false ending, E minor, turn it into dominant, then end it. What did I do right there? E minor, turn it into dominant, because then it turns into what? It turns into the 5 of A7, the chord I'm moving to. Instead of playing E7, how about I turn it into the diminished? I like that. From the final moment, A7. False ending. Turn this into, I'm thinking E7 right now, but I'm going right to the diminished chord. Play that melody a little better. Let me play it better one more time. And then finish it, right? That's a choice. Or I can resolve to a totally different chord. Instead of doing my false ending to 6, how about I do my false ending into 4, right? It's not a chord you'd expect. So to 4. That's a really false ending because that sounds very different. And then your ears are probably telling you what to do after this. 4 to minor 4, and then resolve to your final 1 chord. That's another nice false ending. So A, right? False ending, minor 4, and then you end, right? So I could even do both of those false endings. So E minor, back to the turnaround, another false ending, C minor to G. So you can have some fun with these endings if you want, these sort of false endings that sound really cool. And also keep in mind, I am only doing small voicings right here. I'm not really doing like the larger shapes. You could go wild with this stuff once you start to use larger shapes, or even better, don't even do a chord melody. Just play whatever chord you want and you sing the melody. That can give you a ton of different sounds too, a ton of different options, because you're not, forced to play specific inversions that have the melody on top. You can play whatever chords you want because you're singing the melody. It doesn't matter where the melody is in the chord if you're singing it. That's another choice. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of like big, colorful sounds you can get out of that. So like, I'll kind of dip into that at the end. Maybe like, if you notice what I did right there, I dipped into the dark dimension. I played a 4 chord as my false ending. I played 4 chord false ending. Then I dipped into the parallel minor. I mean, you could go crazy with that. Tons of stuff you could do with this, right? Everything I'm doing right there is just the same stuff. It's the same strategies. 5 ofs, replacing with relatives. If I'm playing a minor 4 chord, which I did a lot right there, using that chord to get into the parallel minor, right? Messing around with these sounds. That stuff is perfect, especially for a false ending, because your ear is already, like lost. I don't want to say lost, but it doesn't know what's happening because your ear was expecting to hear bum, bum. audience expecting to hear one, but now you're doing something else. So you're just taking your listener's ear along for the ride, and you can basically do whatever the hell you want as long as you end with a final one chord. It's going to be satisfying. So you can really experiment with this stuff. So if you guys want, maybe show up in the Discord and kind of experiment with, or show me kind of how you're experimenting with these moves. Because again, what I'm doing here is just what I'm thinking of right now, or what I'm thinking of when I was prepping this video. You could come up with totally different choices that might sound totally interesting or way better than what I'm doing or whatever. So experiment with this stuff. Lots of things can happen with this. It's always nice to have these tools in your pocket because it can just sound really cool. I'll play it one more time. Right? Pretty fun stuff. Hopefully all this stuff makes sense. Of course, let me know if you have questions. I'm flying through this stuff for sure because we've already talked about all of it. But if you have questions, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the Discord. And I will see you guys in the next one where we will do this again, exact same process, but with a very popular modern pop tune.